What's going on, guys? It's Caleb, continuing our course today with some JavaScript on Codecademy.com. Let's go ahead and get started. We are moving on with some functions. So let's just go ahead and navigate over here and start on with our introduction to functions in JavaScript. And this is going to be a short little introduction. So let's go ahead and meet functions. Functions are really handy and nice. So let's go ahead and reset this. Alright, so programming is simply the way to give instructions to the computer. And getting started, we learned about if-else statements. We want to keep learning ways to instruct the computer to perform repeatable tasks efficiently. Let's briefly review uses the computer to determine the range that our bank balance falls in. So, pretty much, if balance is less than $10, use console.log to print out balance minus $5. Otherwise, use console.log to print the balance. So, we go up into our if statement. If balance is less than 10, console.log, and we want our balance minus 5. Else, we just want to console.log our balance. And otherwise, use console.log. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And our balance is 20.97, so we got the green light because it did not run the first code block because our balance is greater than 10. So let's go ahead and move on. Programming is similar to baking cakes. Seriously. Imagine you are trying to teach your friend Jane how to bake many different types of cakes. Each cake takes a different ingredient, in example inputs, but the bake instructions are always the same. Preheat the oven at 300 degrees, mix all the ingredients in a bowl, put contents into oven for 30 minutes. And the output will be different cake each time. It is tedious to have to repeat to Jane the same bake instructions every time. What if we could just say bake, and Jane would know to execute those 3 steps? That's exactly what a function is. Lines 3 declares the function and gives it a name. Focus on line 4 and 5. The code within the curly brackets is the code we want to use again and again. An example, the bake instructions. Line 4 declares a variable called val. Line 5 prints the value of the variable. On line 8 through 11, we are explaining what calling a function means. And on line 12, replace the 6 with any number and press run. Do this a few times to see the beauty of functions. So let's go ahead and look at our function. And a simpler way to define a function rather than show what's here is, well, let's just go with the way they're showing. They're showing like you would create a variable, and then you would put your variable name equals function, and then your option parameters, which they're passing through a number right here. And number is then later on referenced right here by the val. But we have an open curly brace, so this is all new to us pretty much. Now we're declaring a new variable within inside our function that is called val, and it's equaling to the number of that's being passed to the function. And you'll see this later on when we call our function. We're just going to put a number through here, and this is acting as a temporal variable that's going to be put into here. And it looks like they're dividing that number by 3. Console.log the value. Now on line 11 we call the function by name. Here it is called divide by 3. We tell the computer what the number input is, an example 6. The computer then uses the code inside the function. So we call divide by 3, and this is where our number comes into play. As you can see, they put a 6 here, so let's just change it to 12 and go ahead and click run. 12 divided by 3 equals 4, and we get the green light. So let's go ahead and move on. And let's reset this. Think of a function as having 4 parts. 1. Declare a function using var, and then give it a name. 2. Then you must use the function keyword to tell the computer that you are making a function. 3. The bit in the parentheses is called the parameter. Think of this as a placeholder word that we give a specific value when we call the function. See the hint for more. 4. Then write your block of reusable code between the curly braces. Every line of code in this block must end with a semicolon. So, back to what I was saying on introductions of functions, there's an easier way of writing functions, and let's just go ahead and rewrite this function the way I'm talking about it. It's a lot more simpler, a lot more dynamic, and you'll see a lot of modern day coders use this way a lot more than you see var greeting equals function. And it's simple because you just say function, and then you can be like Bob, and then whatever you want through the parentheses. And also, you always want to make sure that whenever you create a function, that you want these option parameters right here, which are just the parentheses. You can't have a function without option parameters. As you can see, we're going to get an error missing the option parameters. And you don't really have to pass things through a function. Function is just a block of code, like they said, that contains a bunch of commands inside of it, so you can just call the group of commands later on instead of repeating all those commands. You call one group. So the rewrite Bob, or not Bob, but rewrite greeting, we just change this to greeting, and then we'd pass our name, and then it's console.logging greet to you, or great to see you, then it's adding a space and then our name. So go ahead and paste this, and if we were to comment the first function out by using a multi-line comment, we are now getting our new function that we just created. And if you compare this function to the old function, it's a lot smaller, doesn't take up as much space, it's a lot neater, and this right here would probably be the best way to do functions. But I understand if you don't like this way, if you don't understand it, to use the normal way, because it's a lot simpler for, I guess, beginners who don't fully understand what they are doing quite yet. They're not grasping the whole idea. But anyways, moving on. We pretty much just explained everything. It says, on line 11, call the greeting function and put in a name that you want the greeting function to include. Press run. Okay, so pretty much what it wants us to do is call our greeting function. So to call a function, you type in the function's name, which in our case is greeting. Give you some spaces here. And then those option parameters, we're going to pass in a string, and make sure to have parentheses around this, or else it'll give you an error. And let's go ahead and run this. And it says, great to see you, Caleb. So it obviously worked fine. And if you don't pass on a string through here, if you just type in like random, as you can see, it highlights in red. And if we were to run this, we should get an error. So we obviously got an error, but you might try and pass in a number. And let's try and run that. And the numbers get passed through fine. But just remember, when you're passing in something and it turns red, make sure to turn it into a string, for it's a string that's getting passed through. So we got the green light. Moving on. So how does a function work? Let's break it down exactly how a computer thinks when it sees a code for a function. The variable function name equals function. Curly brace, code, more lines of code, and then we're closing off our curly brace with a closed curly brace and a semicolon. So the var keyword declares the function. Var is always followed by a name. The keyword function tells the computer it is a function and not something else, because there's multiple things. Further on in the course, you'll learn about objects and so forth, and it just helps Java declare what it's dealing with. So what it wants us to do is, let's make a function that tells the world what you want to eat. Declare your function and call it food demand. So, like I said before, I don't really enjoy writing functions the normal way. I like writing my functions like this by starting off with function. The name of our function would be food demand. And it's good to get in the habit of writing your functions like this. You can call the parameter anything you like, but we'll call it food because that is the thing is going to be changed each time we call the function. So it wants us to pass in food through our option parameters. So go up here to the parentheses and type in food. Number 3, your reusable block of code follow this. Surround it with the right brackets. The code you want to repeat is console.log I want to eat plus a space plus food. So to do this, we just say console.log, and then within that we can say I want to eat, and I'm not sure if it'll count it wrong if you put a space after this. Depending on whoever wrote this actual lesson will declare whether or not if they want you to add the space by adding an additional string to the console, as you can see down here in the example. But it's easier if you just add a string right here, or a space, not a string. And then we're going to plus our food, and then we're going to close off this, and now we want to call our function, because if you don't call your function, nothing will ever be ran. So we type in food demand, and we just pass in our food, make sure it's string value, and let's just say pizza. End it with a semicolon and run. I want to eat pizza. So everything seems to be good. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next lesson. Alright, let's reset this. So, lesson 5, trying it all together. Why is the code organized like this on lines 2 through 5? The computer can understand the code without such spacing, but it makes editing a lot easier and is best practice. Do I have to put a semicolon at the end of each line of code in the reusable block, and at the end of the entire function? Yes. At the end of each line of the block code with the curly braces, and after the entire function after the curly braces, please put a semicolon. The semicolon acts like a period in a sentence. It helps the computer know where we are stopping the code at. So, the big part of programming is debugging. That just means figuring out what the heck went wrong with your code. Why don't we run it? Look at line 9. It has many syntax errors. See how lack of spacing makes debugging hard. Fix the function on line 9, make sure the syntax is right, make sure it looks nice, call the greeting function once it is fixed. Don't forget to pass in a specific name. So this function just looks awful. Awful, I say. And let's just go ahead and just create a new function from scratch, because it'll be a lot easier and you won't have to sit here and waste time of hitting enter a billion times and spacing, making everything look pretty, and then correcting. So just type function. Now let me put a space between these. Function, our function name, which is greeting, option parameters, and it wants us to pass through a name, open and close curly brace, and then it wants us to console.log, and then our name. Now, if we were to delete this whole function, or we don't have to delete it, we can just comment it out. We can now call our greeting function and pass in the string of Caleb. And now, when we hit the semicolon and run it, we will get Caleb in our compiler, or our console. So, that's how you pretty much fix this crappy looking line of code, and it looks a heck of a lot better right down here. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the thumbs up, like it down below. Take a minute to hit the subscribe button also. If you're liking the courses, it really helps me if you subscribe, and post any comments if you got lost, any questions, any suggestions. Until next time guys, peace.